The stars disappeared first. Taman Park stood at the observation window of Vanguard 7, Earth's largest orbital defense station, and watched as shadows swallowed the light. He had been a captain in Earth's Space Defense Force for 12 years, but nothing in his training prepared him for this moment. "Captain, sensors are going crazy," said Lieutenant Kim from the control station. Her voice shook. "There are thousands of them." Taman looked at the tactical display. Red dots filled the screen like drops of blood spreading through water. 3,000 ships, maybe more. They were huge, each one 10 times the size of Earth's largest carrier. The fleet moved in perfect formation, surrounding the solar system like a closing fist. "Send the alert to Earth Defense Command," Taman said. His mouth felt dry. "Tell them we have company." The alien ships stopped just beyond Mars' orbit. For 6 hours, they waited in silence. Earth's military scrambled. Every ship, every fighter, every defense satellite went on high alert. In those 6 hours, Taman learned what fear really meant. It wasn't the quick fear of combat. It was the slow, cold fear of knowing you were completely outmatched. Then the message came. The face that appeared on every screen across Earth and its colonies was not human. Admiral Velthar of the Vrelian hegemony had gray skin that looked like stone, 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern, and a mouth that didn't quite move right when he spoke. But the translation was perfect. "People of Earth," Velthar said, "I am Admiral Velthar, Supreme Commander of the Vrelian hegemony. We have conquered 847 worlds across this galaxy. Your planet will be number 848. You have 72 hours to surrender. Comply, and your people will be integrated into our empire. Resist, and you will be eliminated. There is no third option." The transmission ended. Taman stood frozen. Around him, his crew looked at each other in shock. Someone was crying quietly at their station. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim said, "Earth Defense is ordering us to attack Pattern Delta. They're sending everything we have." Taman nodded slowly. He knew what that meant. Pattern Delta was the last resort. Throw everything at the enemy and hope for the best. It had never been meant for an actual battle. It was supposed to be theoretical. The human fleet launched 16 hours after the ultimatum. 200 ships, the pride of Earth's military, accelerated toward the alien armada. Taman watched from Vanguard 7 as Earth's finest weapons fired. Nuclear missiles streaked through space. Railgun slugs moved at fractions of light speed. Laser batteries capable of cutting through asteroids focused their beams on alien hulls. Nothing happened. The Vrelian shields absorbed everything. The nuclear explosions looked like soap bubbles popping against an invisible wall. The railgun slugs bounced off or simply disappeared. The lasers scattered into useless light shows. Then the Vrelians fired back. Taman had never seen weapons like that. Purple energy beams crossed the distance in seconds. When they hit Earth's ships, the vessels didn't explode. They folded. Reality itself seemed to bend around them, and then they were just gone. Erased from existence. In 90 minutes, Earth's fleet was destroyed. 200 ships, 50,000 people, gone. "Get me Earth Defense," Taman said quietly, but Earth Defense wasn't responding anymore. Their headquarters had been hit in the first wave. Far below on Earth's surface, Dr. Hyeri Nam watched the same battle from her underground laboratory beneath the Korean peninsula. She was head of the Global Defense Initiative, a secret project that most people didn't know existed. At 60 years old, she had dedicated her life to preparing Earth for this exact moment. Everyone thought first contact would be peaceful. They were wrong. Hyeri turned to her assistant. "Activate Protocol Omega. Send the signal to all sites." "Doctor, are you sure? Once we start, there's no going back." "They've already started," Hyeri said, pointing at the screen showing Earth's burning cities. "We're just finishing what they began." The Vrelian ground forces landed on the third day. Massive dropships descended on every major city: Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Mumbai. The aliens came in force, expecting resistance. They got some. Minho Choi was 19 years old and had been studying engineering at Seoul National University when the aliens arrived. Now he crouched in the ruins of his campus, holding a rifle he barely knew how to use. Around him, other students and citizens formed a desperate defense line. "They're coming from the west," someone shouted. Minho saw them. Vrelian soldiers marched in formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons humming with power. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. They probably had. The humans opened fire. Some aliens fell, but most kept coming. Their shields worked on small arms, too. Minho fired until his rifle ran empty, then picked up another from a fallen friend. He fired again, and again. It didn't matter. The Vrelians walked through the resistance like it was nothing. Minho saw people die around him, people he had known since childhood, his professor, his neighbors, his friends. He ran when there was nothing left to do but run. Behind him, Seoul burned. Across the world, the same scene repeated. The Vrelians were efficient. They had done this before, conquered hundreds of worlds. They knew how to break a species. First, destroy the military. Second, destroy the infrastructure. Third, wait for the survivors to realize resistance was pointless. It took 68 hours total. 68 hours from the ultimatum to the complete collapse of every major Earth government. The Vrelians gathered the survivors in camps, sorted them, and began the process of integration. Earth was now part of the Vrelian hegemony. Admiral Velthar stood in what used to be New York City. The buildings were mostly rubble now. The Hudson River was full of debris. The sky was dark with smoke. He had seen this view 800 times on 800 worlds. This was victory, clean, quick, efficient. "Admiral," one of his officers said, "we're detecting a transmission from somewhere in the eastern continent. It's broadcasting on all channels." "Ignore it," Velthar said. "It's probably a resistance group making final threats. They always do." "Sir, I think you should hear this." The officer played the transmission. A human woman appeared on the screen. She looked calm. Behind her stood a human male in military uniform. He was smiling slightly. "This is Dr. Jisoo Lee of Earth," the woman said. "We are transmitting this message to all Vrelian forces and to any species monitoring this sector. What you have done here today will be remembered as the hegemony's greatest mistake." Velthar laughed. He had heard speeches like this before. Broken species trying to save face. But then the woman said something that made him stop laughing. "You have 3 choices. Leave our system immediately, face trial for your war crimes, or learn why humanity has never been visited before today, despite our radio signals reaching across the galaxy for over a century." The transmission continued, but Velthar was no longer smiling. Admiral Velthar ordered his technicians to trace the signal. It came from deep underground, somewhere beneath the Korean peninsula. The transmission was strong, broadcasting on every frequency the Vrelians used for communication. Whoever sent it wanted to make sure every alien in the solar system could hear it. "Is this a threat?" asked Commander Yuna Shin. She was human, one of the few who had chosen to collaborate with the Vrelians. They had promised her power, a position in their empire. She believed them because she wanted to survive. "Should we take it seriously?" Velthar studied the human woman on the screen. Dr. Jisoo Lee. She was older, maybe 50 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair. She looked tired, but not defeated. That bothered him. "No species threatens the hegemony after they've been conquered," Velthar said. "This is desperation. Ignore it." But the transmission continued. Dr. Jisoo Lee began to speak again, and this time her words were different. She wasn't begging. She wasn't negotiating. She was teaching. For over 100 years, Earth has been broadcasting radio signals into space, Dr. Jisoo said. We sent messages of peace, music, mathematics, greetings in every human language. We hoped someone would answer. No one ever did. She paused and looked directly at the camera. It felt like she was looking through the screen at Velthar himself. We thought we were alone in the universe. We were wrong. The galaxy is full of intelligent life. But none of you ever contacted us. None of you ever visited. We wondered why. Some humans thought we weren't interesting enough. Others thought we were too primitive. But a few of us, the ones who built the Global Defense Initiative, we suspected the truth. Behind her, Colonel Dong-hyun Kwon stepped forward. He was tall for a human, with scars on his face that spoke of combat experience. He crossed his arms, and that slight smile remained on his lips. "You were afraid of us," Colonel Dong-hyun said simply. Velthar snorted. Afraid of humans? These weak, short-lived creatures? Their technology was centuries behind the hegemony. Their ships were toys. Their weapons were harmless. How could anyone fear them? "Admiral, she's accessing something," one of the Vrelian technicians said. "She's pulling data from our own ships. How is she doing that?" On the screen, Dr. Jisoo touched a control panel. Holographic displays appeared around her, showing complex data. Velthar recognized the format. It was Vrelian military intelligence files. Files that should have been encrypted and secure. "When you invaded our system, you brought your databases with you," Dr. Jisoo explained. "Your ships contain historical records of every species you've encountered, every world you've conquered. We've been reading those files for the past 3 days, and we found something very interesting." She pulled up a star map. It showed the galaxy with thousands of markers indicating inhabited worlds. Earth was highlighted in blue. Around it, in a sphere approximately 50 light-years in radius, were dozens of empty zones. Places where no intelligent species had evolved or settled. "This is a quarantine zone," Dr. Jisoo said. "Earth sits at the center of an area that galactic civilization has avoided for 70,000 years. Your own records confirm it. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional." Velthar leaned forward. He had never paid attention to Earth's location before. It was just another primitive world on the edge of settled space. But now, looking at the map, he saw the pattern, the empty zone, the deliberate absence of contact. 73,000 years ago, Dr. Jisoo continued, a species called the Architects seeded this galaxy with genetic material. They created the potential for intelligent life on millions of worlds. Most of those worlds developed slowly or not at all. Some produced species like yours, Admiral, advanced, civilized, capable of space travel and empire building. She pulled up another file. This one showed complex genetic data. But 12 worlds received a different kind of seed. The Architects called it Project Endurance. They wanted to see what would happen if they pushed evolution to its absolute limits. They wanted to create species that could survive anything. Species that could adapt to the most hostile environments. Species that wouldn't stop, couldn't be broken, would never surrender. Engineer Suman Park appeared on screen next to Dr. Jisoo. She was younger, in her 30s, wearing the uniform of Earth's Space Development Agency. She looked excited rather than scared. "Let me show you something," Suman said. She pulled up comparative biological data. "This is a Vrelian soldier, standard height, weight, bone density. Now this is a human." The numbers appeared side by side. Velthar read them carefully. Then he read them again, convinced there was an error. "Human bones are 6 times denser than Vrelian bones," Suman explained. "Our muscles regenerate faster than any other known species. We can heal from injuries that would kill you. We can survive without food for 40 days, without water for 7 days. We can function with only 4 hours of sleep per night. Our pain tolerance is off your medical charts, and we have something you don't have." She highlighted a particular biological system in the human body. We call it adrenaline. When humans are threatened, when we're injured or scared, our bodies flood with chemicals that make us stronger, faster. Our reaction time improves. Our strength increases by up to 40%. We stop feeling pain. We stop thinking about anything except survival. Your own scientists classified this as biologically impossible when they first scanned captured humans. But it's not impossible. It's engineered. Velthar felt something he hadn't felt in decades of conquest. Uncertainty. We are not prey species, Dr. Jisoo said, her voice steady. We are persistence predators. On Earth, humans hunted by chasing animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't need to be faster. We just needed to never stop. We evolved on a planet with higher gravity than 80% of known inhabited worlds. Our diseases are more aggressive. Our predators are more lethal. Our weather is more violent. We survived it all. Colonel Dong-hyun spoke again. You've destroyed our cities. You've killed billions of our people. You've shattered our civilization. And you think you've won. But all you've done is give 8 billion survivors a single purpose. Captain Taemin Park appeared on the transmission now. He was broadcasting from somewhere new, not from Vanguard 7. The station had been destroyed. But Taemin had survived, and he had found others. We are not surrendering, Taemin said. We are not negotiating. We are promising. Every human who survived your attack is now your enemy. We will resist. We will fight. We will never stop, because that's what humans do. We endure. The transmission showed more data, files the humans had stolen from Vrelian archives, records of the architects, notes about Project Endurance, warnings left by the ancient species. One warning appeared in text form on every screen. Species designated for endurance protocols should be observed but never contacted. Their survival capabilities pose significant risk to galactic stability. Recommend permanent isolation. The architects knew, Dr. Jisoo said. They knew what they created. They knew humans were dangerous, and they tried to protect the galaxy from us by keeping us isolated. But you didn't listen to their warnings. You came anyway. You thought you could conquer us like you conquered all the others. She leaned forward, and for the first time, she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You were wrong. The transmission cut to black. Then text appeared in every language the Vrelians used. You have 72 hours to leave our system. This is your only warning. Velthar stood in silence. Around him, his command staff looked uncertain. Commander Yuna Shin was pale. Admiral, she said quietly, maybe we should consider... Silence, Velthar snapped. This is psychological warfare. They're trying to scare us with ancient myths and biological data. We have conquered 800 worlds. We will not be frightened by one more. But deep inside, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, Velthar felt something cold settle in his chest. For the first time in his long career, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, they had made a terrible mistake. The 72 hours passed without Earth surrendering. Admiral Velthar ordered his forces to increase occupation security, more troops on the ground, more ships in orbit, more surveillance on the remaining human population. He told himself it was standard procedure, not a response to the transmission. But his officers knew better. In the ruins of Seoul, Minho Choi learned to fight properly. The initial panic of invasion had passed, replaced by cold anger. He joined a resistance cell led by former soldiers who taught him everything they knew. How to move silently, how to sabotage alien equipment, how to survive on almost nothing. The aliens need 8 hours of sleep every day, his instructor explained. We only need 4. That gives us an advantage. While they rest, we attack. Minho absorbed everything. He learned that Vrelian soldiers had better armor and weapons, but they were slower to react. Their training emphasized formation and discipline. Human fighters used chaos. They struck from shadows, melted away, struck again. It wasn't honorable warfare. It was survival. 3 weeks after the invasion, Minho's cell destroyed a Vrelian supply depot using homemade explosives. The aliens died in the blast, but more came to replace them. It didn't matter. The Resistance wasn't trying to win battles. They were trying to make occupation impossible. Deep in her underground facility, Dr. Hyeri Nam worked without sleeping. Her team had been planning for this scenario for 30 years. The Global Defense Initiative wasn't just a military project. It was humanity's insurance policy. "How many ships made it out?" she asked her assistant. 247 confirmed escapes. Maybe more. The Vrelians are still searching. Hyeri nodded. It was better than expected. When Earth first detected alien radio signals decades ago and received no response, a small group of scientists and military leaders began asking dangerous questions. Why the silence? Why had no one visited? What if first contact was hostile? Most people called them paranoid. Some called them crazy, but they built the ships anyway. Hidden across the solar system in asteroid bases and moon colonies, disguised as civilian research projects. Slow ships, sleeper ships, designed to carry humans far away if Earth ever fell. "What about the genetic archives?" Hyeri asked. "Safe. Every ship has a complete copy. If humanity goes extinct on Earth, the archives will allow us to rebuild somewhere else." Hyeri felt a weight lift slightly from her shoulders. Even if the Vrelians won, even if they killed every human on Earth, humanity would survive. Somewhere in the galaxy, those ships would find new worlds. They would plant seeds, and someday, maybe centuries from now, humans would return. Colonel Dongyun Quan stood in a command center that didn't officially exist. It was built inside a mountain in Chile, deep enough that Vrelian sensors couldn't detect it. Around him, officers coordinated resistance movements across the planet. "We have confirmation from Tokyo, Mumbai, and Lagos," one officer reported. "Their cells are active and operating." "What about the European groups?" "London was hit hard. Berlin and Paris are reorganizing." Dongyun studied the global map. Red zones showed heavy Vrelian presence. Green zones showed active resistance. There was more green than he expected. Humans were adaptable. Give them a reason to fight, and they found ways. "Sir, we're receiving a coded message from Dr. Hyeri Nam. She says Phase 2 is ready." Dongyun smiled. Phase 2 was the part the Vrelians wouldn't expect. It was the reason humanity had spent decades preparing. Captain Taman Park floated in zero gravity inside a salvaged shuttle. His station was gone, but he had survived along with 40 crew members. They lived in the debris field now, hiding among the wreckage of Earth's destroyed fleet. The Vrelians thought everyone was dead. They were wrong. "Captain, we're picking up movement," Lieutenant Kim reported. She looked thinner now, exhausted. They all did, but she was still alive, still fighting. "What kind of movement?" "Ships, hundreds of them. They're launching from hidden locations all over the solar system." Taman pulled himself to the scanner station. His heart began to beat faster. The ships were small, nothing like military vessels. They were the sleeper ships, the backup plan, humanity's hope. "They're scattering," Lieutenant Kim said. "Different vectors, different speeds. The Vrelians are trying to intercept, but there are too many." Taman watched as the ships disappeared one by one into deep space. Some were caught and destroyed, but most made it. They jumped to faster-than-light travel using basic drives that the Vrelians had thought too primitive to bother with. The aliens were wrong about that, too. "How many escaped?" Taman asked. "At least 200, maybe more. They're beyond sensor range now." Taman closed his eyes and whispered thanks to whatever gods might be listening. Earth had fallen, but humanity would continue. The ships carried everything needed to rebuild: knowledge, technology, genetic samples, and most importantly, They carried people who remembered what the Vrelians had done. On a Vrelian command ship, Admiral Velthar watched the escape with growing frustration. His orders had been clear: stop the human ships. His forces had failed. Most of the fleeing vessels were gone, scattered across the galaxy. "It doesn't matter," Commander Unishin said. "They're running away. That means we've won." Velthar wanted to believe her, but something bothered him about the human strategy. They hadn't fought to protect their planet. They had fought to buy time for the ships to escape. That suggested planning. Long-term planning. The kind of planning species only did when they expected the worst. "Pull up the files on Project Endurance again," Velthar ordered. His science officer complied. The architect records appeared on screen. Velthar read them more carefully this time. Most of it was genetic data and biological analysis. But there were psychological profiles too. Notes about human behavior. One section caught his attention. Endurance species demonstrate extreme loyalty to group members and extended memory of grievances. Revenge-seeking behavior observed across all test populations. Recommend avoiding hostile contact. Revenge-seeking behavior. Extended memory of grievances. Velthar thought about the ships that had just escaped. 10,000 humans on each ship. All of them had watched Earth burn. All of them had lost families, friends, homes. All of them would remember exactly who was responsible. "How long until those ships reach inhabited systems?" Velthar asked. "Decades at least. Maybe longer depending on their destinations." "And what happens when they arrive?" The science officer hesitated. "Sir, they're refugees. They'll seek shelter. Probably request assistance from whatever species they encounter." "Or they'll do what humans do best," Velthar said quietly. "They'll survive. They'll adapt. They'll learn, and they'll remember." For the first time, Velthar understood the real threat. It wasn't the resistance fighters on Earth. It wasn't the biological advantages humans possessed. It was time. Humans lived short lives compared to most species, but they thought in long terms. They planned for futures they wouldn't live to see. They passed grudges from generation to generation. The hegemony had conquered Earth. But in doing so, they had scattered humanity across the galaxy. And every human who escaped would tell the same story. A story of home destroyed, of billions killed, of an enemy that needed to pay. Dr. Jisoo Lee appeared on Velthar's screen again. This wasn't a broadcast this time. It was a direct message to his command ship. "Admiral," she said, "I hope you're tracking our ships. I hope you see them escaping. Because I want you to understand something. Those ships don't carry soldiers. They carry scientists, engineers, teachers, parents, people who will build new lives on distant worlds, people who will have children and teach them about Earth, about what you did here." She paused, and her expression hardened. "In 20 years, those children will be adults. In 50 years, they'll have their own children. In 100 years, there will be human colonies across the galaxy, and every single one of them will know exactly what the Vrelian hegemony did to their homeworld. Every single one will remember. Humans never forget, Admiral. We hold grudges for generations." The transmission ended. Velthar sat in his command chair and realized that Dr. Jisoo Lee was right. The hegemony had conquered 800 worlds, but none of those worlds had been marked by the architects as dangerous. None had been designed to endure. None had been quarantined for good reason. Earth was different, and the hegemony had just learned why the hard way. 20 years passed. Earth remained under Vrelian occupation, but it was not the peaceful integration the hegemony had expected. The human population had been reduced from 8 billion to 3 billion through war, disease, and forced relocations. The survivors lived in designated zones, working in resource extraction facilities. Earth's minerals, its water, its remaining forests, all fed the hegemony's endless hunger. But humans are hard to kill completely. Minho Choi was 39 years old now. The young student who had fumbled with a rifle in the ruins of Seoul had become a general in the resistance. His face was covered in scars. He had lost an eye in an ambush 10 years ago, but he was still alive, still fighting, and he had trained thousands of others to do the same. The Vrelians controlled the cities and major industrial centers. The resistance controlled everything else: mountains, forests, ocean territories, the underground tunnel networks that grew larger every year. It was a strange war. The aliens had the power. The humans had the patience. "General," one of his officers said, "we're receiving the signal, the one we've been waiting for." Minho felt his pulse quicken. For 20 years, the resistance had prepared for this moment. They had trained. They had built weapons in secret. They had mapped every Vrelian installation. They had waited for the right time. That time had finally come. "Send the word to all cells," Minho ordered. "Liberation begins at dawn." Far from Earth, Captain Taemin Park stood on the bridge of the UHSF Reckoning. The United Human Space Force had been born in exile, built by the survivors who escaped Earth's fall. Taemin was 72 years old now, gray-haired and bent with age. But his mind was sharp, and his hatred burned as bright as ever. The Reckoning was humanity's first true warship, built with 20 years of stolen Vrelian technology. The human refugees had not wasted their time. They had learned. They had adapted. They had improved on everything the aliens thought they understood. "Captain, all ships are reporting ready," said Commander Jiwon Ha. She was born on one of the sleeper ships, had never seen Earth except in videos, but she fought for it anyway because her parents had taught her to remember. "How many ships do we have?" Taemin asked. 43 capital ships, 216 fighters, crew complement of 32,000. It wasn't much compared to the Vrelian hegemony's full military, but it was enough. Humanity had learned an important lesson. You didn't need to be stronger than your enemy. You just needed to be willing to do things they wouldn't. "Set course for Earth," Taemin ordered. "It's time to go home." In her laboratory, now relocated to a human colony on a distant world, Dr. Jisoo Lee had become something she never intended. The humans called her the Mother of Vengeance. At 70 years old, she led the genetic enhancement program that turned regular humans into something more dangerous. "The volunteers are ready," her assistant said. Jisoo looked at the young men and women waiting in the medical bay. They knew what the procedure would do. The enhancement protocols pushed human biology to its absolute limits. Stronger bones, faster reflexes, increased healing, enhanced mental processing. But the survival rate was only 70%. 3 out of 10 would die during the procedure. Every single volunteer stepped forward anyway. "Begin the process," Jisoo said quietly. The humans who survived enhancement weren't quite human anymore. They were faster than any natural human, strong enough to bend steel with their hands. Their reaction time was measured in milliseconds. They could fight for days without rest. They healed from injuries that would cripple normal people. The Vrelians had created these soldiers by underestimating humanity, by giving humans a reason to push their biology beyond natural limits, by teaching them that normal rules didn't matter anymore. Admiral Velthar was old too. At 80 Vrelian years, he should have retired, but he remained on Earth, commanding the occupation force. The hegemony kept him there because he knew humans better than any other Vrelian. He understood their tricks, their tactics, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. But even he didn't see the coordinated attack coming. It started in Seoul. Minho Choi's forces emerged from tunnels directly beneath the Vrelian command center. They used explosives, homemade weapons, and the element of surprise. The fighting was brutal, close quarters, hand to hand. The kind of combat Vrelians had trained for, but humans had lived. Then Tokyo rose up, then Mumbai, then Lagos, Then every human settlement across Earth simultaneously attacked their occupiers. It was coordinated down to the second, planned over 20 years of silent preparation. The Vrelians fought back, but they were unprepared for the ferocity. Human soldiers didn't retreat when wounded. They didn't surrender when surrounded. They used tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare: suicide attacks, biological weapons, torture of captured enemies to gain information. "They're not fighting like a resistance," Commander Yuna Shin reported to Admiral Velthar. She looked terrified. "They're fighting like they have nothing to lose." "Because they don't," Velthar said grimly. "We took everything from them. Now they want payment in blood." Space above Earth filled with explosions. The human exile fleet had arrived. Captain Taman Park's forces crashed into the Vrelian orbital defenses like a hammer. The Reckoning led the charge, its weapons firing continuously. "Target their carriers first," Taman ordered. "Cut off their supply lines." The battle was not elegant. It was not clean. Human ships that couldn't win fair fights rammed Vrelian vessels. Pilots who were damaged set their drives to overload and plowed into alien formations. Every human sailor knew they might not survive this battle. They fought anyway. On the ground, Minho watched as enhanced human soldiers arrived from the colony worlds. These were Jisu's creations. They moved like nothing Minho had ever seen. They didn't just fight Vrelian soldiers. They hunted them, tracked them down in every hiding place, showed no mercy. "General, the Western District is clear," one of his officers reported. "What about prisoners?" "The enhanced units don't take prisoners, sir." Minho felt sick but nodded. This was what war had become. This was what the Vrelians had created when they destroyed Earth. A humanity that had forgotten how to be merciful. The battle for Earth lasted 17 days. The Vrelians fought hard, but they were not prepared for enemies who valued revenge over survival, for soldiers who saw death as an acceptable price for freedom, for a species that had spent 20 years thinking about nothing except this moment. Admiral Velthar knew the battle was lost on day 12. His forces were being systematically destroyed. Relief ships from other hegemony worlds would arrive in weeks, but by then Earth would be lost. He sent a message to Hegemony Command. Requesting full fleet support. Earth resistance has been reinforced by exile forces with advanced technology. Human combat doctrine emphasizes self-sacrifice and ignores casualty ratios. Recommend treating Earth as a Class 9 threat. Class 9 was reserved for extinction-level dangers, species that threatened the stability of the galaxy itself. The response came from the Hegemony Council. "Request denied. You have sufficient forces. Complete the mission." Velthar understood then that he was going to die on Earth. The Council didn't believe his reports. They thought he was exaggerating. They still saw humans as a minor threat. They were wrong. On day 17, Minho Choi's forces stormed the last Vrelian stronghold in Seoul. Velthar stood in his command center, weapon in hand, ready for the end. He thought about the transmission from 20 years ago. Dr. Jisu Lee's warning, Colonel Donghyun Kwan's promise. The door exploded inward. Enhanced human soldiers poured through. Behind them came Minho, older and scarred but unmistakably human, unmistakably alive. "Admiral Velthar," Minho said in careful Vrelian, "your empire is welcome to try again, but Earth belongs to humans. It will always belong to humans. You can kill us, but you can't break us. You can occupy us, but you can't defeat us, because we will never stop, never surrender, never forgive." Velthar raised his weapon, but a human soldier shot him first. He fell, bleeding, dying. His last thought was a simple one. They tried to warn us. Overhead, Captain Taman Park watched as the last Vrelian ship retreated from Earth's orbit. The old captain stood on his bridge, tears running down his face. After 20 years in exile, Earth was free. "Send a message to all human colonies," Taman ordered. "Tell them we're coming home." The war did not end with Earth's liberation. It spread. Human fleets, scattered across the galaxy for 20 years, had learned the locations of Vrelian colonies. They had mapped trade routes, they had identified military installations, and they had spent 2 decades preparing to use that information. Admiral Dong-Yun Quan, now 74 years old, commanded the human fleet from the carrier Endurance. He stood in the command center watching as strike groups departed for their assigned targets. Each group had a simple mission: make the Vrelians hurt the way humanity had hurt. "Sir, Group 7 reports successful raid on the mining colony in the Theta sector," an officer reported. "Facilities destroyed. Vrelian casualties estimated at 4,000. Dong-Yun nodded. He felt no satisfaction in the numbers, just cold purpose. 4,000 Vrelians dead was nothing compared to the billions of humans killed during Earth's invasion. But it was a start. The human strategy was brutal in its simplicity. They didn't try to hold territory. They struck and vanished. They attacked supply convoys. They sabotaged military stations. They hit civilian infrastructure the same way the Vrelians had hit Earth's cities. Every raid was a message. You wanted war. Now you have it. The Hegemony Council finally understood the threat. They gathered on their homeworld, 12 species united under Vrelian leadership, to discuss the human problem. "We must respond with overwhelming force," said the Vrelian Chancellor. "Destroy every human colony. Hunt down every ship. End this threat permanently." "That will require pulling forces from border worlds," warned a Keltharian delegate. "The Zarathian Confederacy has been probing our defenses. If we weaken our positions—" "The humans are a greater threat," the Chancellor interrupted. "They're not trying to conquer. They're trying to destroy. They're a virus spreading through our empire." But mobilizing the full hegemony fleet took time, months, and in those months, human raiders struck dozens of targets. The economy staggered, trade routes closed, colonies demanded protection that the hegemony couldn't provide everywhere at once. On Earth, reconstruction had begun. Minho Choi, now honored as the hero of Seoul, oversaw the rebuilding efforts. The planet was scarred. Cities were ruins. The population was a fraction of what it had been. But humans were building again. "General, we have representatives from 17 colony worlds requesting to join Earth's government," an aide said. Minho looked at the list. These were the exile colonies, the ones founded by the sleeper ships. They had built their own societies in the darkness between stars. Now they wanted to reunite with their homeworld. "Tell them Earth welcomes all humans home," Minho said. "We're one people. We'll rebuild together." In her laboratory, Dr. Jisoo Lee worked on something new. The genetic enhancement program had been successful, perhaps too successful. The enhanced soldiers were powerful, but they were also dangerous. Many struggled to readjust to civilian life. Some couldn't turn off the aggression the enhancements had created. "We need to find a balance," Jisoo told her research team. "We created weapons. Now we need to help them become people again." It was harder than fighting. War had simple rules. Peace was complicated, but Jisoo was determined. Humanity had survived the worst. Now they needed to prove they could do more than just endure. They needed to thrive. Captain Taemin Park retired from military service. At 74, he had earned his rest. He moved to a small house on the Korean coast where he could watch the ocean. The water reminded him of space, vast, dangerous, beautiful. Young officers came to visit him, asking for stories. He told them about the invasion, about the desperate escape, about the long years in exile, about the moment Earth was finally free. "Do you hate them?" a young lieutenant asked. "The Vrelians," Taemin thought carefully before answering. "I hate what they did. I'll never forgive it. But I don't hate them for existing. They made a mistake. They thought we were weak. They learned otherwise. That's enough." The war continued for 5 more years. Human fleets and Vrelian forces clashed across dozens of systems. Neither side was winning. The hegemony was too large to destroy completely, but humanity was too stubborn to surrender. Finally, the Hegemony Council made a decision that would have seemed impossible 30 years ago. They requested peace negotiations. The meeting took place on a neutral station controlled by the Keltharian Concordat, a species that had remained neutral throughout the conflict. Admiral Dong-Hyun Kwon represented humanity. He was old now, 80 years and counting, but his mind was sharp. The Vrelian delegation was led by Chancellor Methys, who had replaced the previous chancellor after the Earth disaster. Methys was young for a Vrelian leader, which meant he was only 300 years old. "We acknowledge that the invasion of Earth was a mistake," Methys began. "The hegemony is prepared to offer reparations, resources, technology, territory. We ask only for peace." Dong-Yun listened without expression. Then he spoke in fluent Vrelian, a language he had spent 20 years learning. "You offer us things, resources, technology, as if Earth is a business transaction. But you cannot give us back what you took. You cannot return the 5 billion dead. You cannot restore the cities you burned. You cannot undo the trauma you inflicted on every human who survived." Methys lowered his head. "You're right. We cannot. But we can ensure it never happens again." "Can you?" Dong-Yun leaned forward. "Your empire has conquered 800 worlds. Earth was supposed to be 848. What makes you think you've changed? What makes you think you won't do this again to the next species you find?" "Because we learned from Earth," Methys said quietly. "We learned that some species cannot be conquered, should not be conquered. The architects marked your world as dangerous. We should have listened." The negotiations lasted 3 months. The treaty that emerged was unprecedented in galactic history. The Vrelian hegemony agreed to return all human territories occupied during the war, pay reparations equivalent to 200 years of Earth's pre-war economy, provide unrestricted access to hegemony technology and scientific databases, establish permanent embassies on Earth and human colony worlds. Most importantly, add a new law to the Hegemony Charter. No species designated by the architects for special observation could be conquered or occupied without unanimous approval from all member species and a full evaluation of the risks. In return, humanity agreed to cease all military operations against hegemony targets, return to pre-war borders, establish trade relationships with hegemony member species, participate in galactic councils as an independent but cooperative power. The treaty was signed on March 15, 2195, 30 years after the invasion. The war was over. Dr. Hyeri Nam, now 95 years old, addressed the United Earth Assembly on the day the treaty was ratified. She was one of the few original Global Defense Initiative members still alive. "30 years ago, I told you that I was preparing for the worst," Hyeri said. Her voice was weak but steady. "I was called paranoid, fearful. Some said I was wasting resources on fantasies. But I was right. First contact was hostile. We were invaded. We were nearly destroyed." She paused and looked across the assembly chamber, where representatives from Earth and all human colonies sat together. "But we survived. We survived because we prepared. Because we refused to believe that the universe was kind. Because we understood something fundamental about humanity. We endure. When everything is taken from us, we find a way. When we're scattered across the stars, we find each other. When we're told to surrender, we fight." The chamber was silent. Every person there had lost someone in the war. Everyone carried scars. "The Vrelians learned to fear us," Hyeri continued, "not because we're monsters, but because we're survivors. And there is nothing more dangerous in this galaxy than a survivor who has nothing left to lose. They came to Earth expecting easy prey. They found apex predators. They came to conquer. They learned to negotiate." She smiled, old and tired, but undefeated. Our ancestors wondered if we were alone in the universe. Now we know we're not. There are thousands of species out there. Some are friends, some are enemies. But all of them now know one truth. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not break. Humanity endures. The assembly stood and applauded, not for victory, not for peace, but for survival, for endurance, for the simple, stubborn fact that humanity was still here. Minho Choi, now 59 and gray-haired, stood with them. He thought about the young student he had been during the invasion, the terrified boy who didn't know how to fight. That boy was gone. In his place was a man who had learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes survival is the greatest victory. Across the galaxy, in human colonies built on worlds the Vrelians had never known existed, children learned history. They learned about Earth, about the invasion, about the 20 years of exile, about the liberation. Their teachers made sure they understood one thing above all else: never forget, not as a call for revenge, not as fuel for hatred, but as a reminder. The universe was dangerous. Other species were not always friends. Peace was not guaranteed. Humanity needed to stay strong, stay prepared, stay united. Captain Taman Park died peacefully in his sleep at age 83. His funeral was attended by thousands. They came from Earth, from colony worlds, from military bases across human space. Admiral Dong-Yun Kwon, his friend and fellow survivor, gave the eulogy. Taemin once told me that he didn't hate the Vrelians for existing, Dong-Yun said. He only hated what they did. That's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is endless. Justice has an ending. We got justice. The treaty gave us that. Taemin understood that continuing to hate would only hurt us. So he stopped. Dong-Yun paused and looked at the assembled crowd. But he never forgot. None of us can forget. We owe that to the 5 billion who didn't survive. We owe it to remember, to teach, to make sure future generations understand what happened here. Not so they hate, but so they prepare. The galaxy settled into a new normal. Humans became active participants in galactic politics. They traded, they shared technology, they made alliances, but they also kept their military strong. They never completely trusted. They always prepared for the worst. Dr. Jisoo Lee died at age 98. Her last words were recorded by her assistant. Tell them we survived, tell them we won, but most importantly, tell them we remained human throughout. That's the real victory. The message from Earth, sent 30 years ago, had promised that the invasion would be remembered as the hegemony's greatest mistake. History proved that message correct. The Vrelian hegemony never recovered its former strength. Member species questioned the wisdom of conquest. Some left the alliance, others demanded reforms. Meanwhile, humanity grew. Colony worlds flourished. The population recovered. New generations were born who knew the invasion only as history, but every human child learned the same lesson in school. We are survivors. We are apex predators in a dangerous galaxy. We endure. And if anyone ever forgot, they only needed to look at Earth's new flag. It showed the planet, scarred but whole, with words beneath it in every human language. We warned you. You didn't listen. We survived anyway. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons, not technology. But a simple truth that every species needed to understand. There are some things you cannot conquer. Some spirits you cannot break. Some species that will endure no matter what you throw at them. Humanity was one of those species. The Vrelians learned that lesson the hard way, and the rest of the galaxy learned from their mistake. The last message from Earth was never a plea. It was never a negotiation. It was a threat, a promise, a warning, and humanity always kept its promises.